No, you can take it down.
Take your mask.
Yeah, take your mask
Take your
down.
mask.
You can take
See,
your mask
I
off.
think you can hear me with this. In any field of endeavor, people use various tools for organizing, for sorting things, putting them into categories, whether it's ideas, thoughts, definitions. They often use graphic tools. Some of them you might remember from school days. Remember the Venn diagram with the two overlapping circles? And the things where the overlap, those were the similarities, and the things on the outside were all the differences. Or you can sort according to columns. Think about the bishop's mitre with the two tails in back, a column for the Old Testament, one for the New Testament. They have distinct boundaries. You can keep them separate. They're mutually exclusive of each other. Mistakes in your categories or missorting them can result in confusion and even worse. For example, if you mentally sort bats into the category of birds, they fly, you're going to waste a lot of time trying to find the feathers, aren't you? Something like that, I think, happened with Peter today. Peter had an organizational system for religion, for his faith. There were columns. Those things that were divine, and column 2, all else that was human. And he had just recently acknowledged Jesus as Messiah. You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. So he knew what category Jesus fit in. In Peter's mind, he was pretty sure what those categories looked like. There were all things human and all things divine. In the divine category, he had very specific ideas, images, didn't he? And when Jesus began to talk about his trajectory and his journey to Jerusalem, it didn't fit Peter's categories at all. It was not, what he was hearing was not part of that column that said divine. Peter knew the scriptures, he knew Israel's history, he knew prophets like Jeremiah, we heard from today. Jeremiah knew what suffering, betrayal, death was. Jeremiah rarely was a part of any merrymaking, for that was a lot of prophets. Instead, he knew suffering, rejection, and pain. But that wasn't the Messiah's lot. The Messiah, the Son of the living God, this was God we're talking about, belonged in a different category. In Peter's mind, that category that was divine had such things as just this absolute radiant glory, endless ease, unstoppable strength, miraculous power, soaring prayers in a magnificent temple, perhaps even better than Christ Church with your new windows, a glorious, magnificent place, the adoration of all, no rejection. And in the human column for Peter, that was all else, all that grit and sorrow of the world, suffering and conflict and brokenness and weakness, loss, all of that was human, not divine. Now, Peter couldn't accept what he heard Jesus saying, I will go to be betrayed, I will go to die. This was not the way Jesus was to come into Jerusalem. In Peter's mind, Jesus was to come as a conquering hero, wasn't he? He would crush his enemies, destroy their economic and political and religious system. Jesus was coming to be successful, to have a campaign that would set Israel back on her throne. He wasn't going to come with weapons or an army. He wasn't coming with a strategic plan for probability or accusation. He was coming then and forever, relying on a community of those who were willing to give and to share, to be there for one another. A beloved community, depending on and supporting one another in the midst of all the world's grit and grind and sorrow. This is the road Jesus was committed to. So it didn't fit Peter's neat columns, and he receives a sharp rebuke from Jesus, doesn't he? Get behind me. There's an error in your calculations. And I think the problem with Peter, which is our problem so often, is we have our own images, our own ideas about what God is and should be, and we project all of our stuff, sometimes our greatest longings and hopes, we project that onto God. So Peter had his columns really a little confused. The divine column turns out to be full of human projection. And Jesus would set him straight. God is not remote and invincible and impeccable, far removed from worldly sorrow and conflicts. God will know suffering because the reality is, in Jesus, in incarnation, God becomes human and takes on and shares in all that is human. That column of brokenness and sorrow, of grit, of loss, of betrayal, the hard things of being part of this world. This is the God revealed in Jesus, and it is God's way to go that way of suffering. It's a scandalous truth. And in this scandalous truth that is our gospel is this paradoxical thing, this mystery, that it is in those very human, broken, sorrowing, gritty things that we are to encounter the holy. Not removed and apart and up in the clouds and soaring, but in the nit and gritty of this world. These are the places where we meet our God. So Jesus tells Peter to get behind him. He tells his disciples then and now, behind me and follow. Pick up your cross, this way that is God's way in the world, and come and follow. Behind me, because I will be in front of you. I will be there with you in this journey that is God's way for life in this world. We're told to pick up our cross, to deny ourselves, to deny all our careful planning, our easy answers, to deny our egos, that egocentric, self-serving way that we tend to be in this world. That, Jesus says, has to go. Let it go and choose God's heart to follow. Choose a life over which we have no control. This new way. And we can do that. We can take the risk to take on all that Jesus' way requires of us because we can trust that God is indeed present. That's what the resurrection assures us of. But the life we find in following Jesus' way is the only life worth having. Turns out, you see, that to really tell the story of Jesus, we need which of those diagrams? The Venn diagram, and in that overlapping center is the human and the divine, because that's what incarnation is all about.